Shilian shifted his body and evaded the object. At first he thought it was a broken branch or nest, but when he looked closer, it was a plank so rotten and rusty that its original shape was indiscernible, and it had 2 steel chains connected on either side. If it was anyone else, they might not be able to tell what it was, but Shilian knew immediately that it was a swing. In the past, Mount Taicang had swings installed everywhere, both for fun and for training. Back when Shilian had only just started to retain memory, there was a time when he accompanied his parents to visit the Royal Holy Pavilion to pray for blessings. He saw a group of young trainees sparring, flipping and flopping all over the swings. It was an exciting performance. The king and queen enjoyed it, and Shilian clapped and shouted his appreciation. The king and queen were so pleased that they heavily rewarded the young trainees, and ever since then, the impression that cultivation was something awesome and fun was left deep in Shilian's heart. However, as for him formally entering the sect for cultivation in his later years, the reason was no longer because it seemed fun. After taking some rest, Shilian continued hiking. The higher he climbed, the thicker the bushes became, and every so often a small animal would flash by, leaving behind the shadow of a bushy tail. There were a number of squirrels huddling in the trees, munching on pine cones, peeking at this uninvited guest. Thorns blocked his path, ripping at his clothes and limbs, but Shilian didn't notice at all. Finally, he reached the peak of the Crown Prince Summit. Of course, the Crown Prince Summit wasn't originally called the Crown Prince Summit, but was given this name after the Crown Prince Temple was constructed. Amidst the bushes and weeds, there were still remnants of pebble-paved grounds here and there, traces of a large burnt foundation hidden. That was once the foundation of the temple. Going across it, through the rubble and ruins, through glass debris, was a fractured old well. Looking from above into its bottom, it was easy to tell that the old well had long since dried up. The distance to the bottom only but a few feet, with only mud visible on the ground. Without hesitation, Shilian crossed his legs over and jumped in. He didn't tumble onto the muddy ground, but instead traversed through that illusion and descended for a number of meters before his feet touched solid ground. The surroundings were so dark that if he were to raise his arms, he wouldn't see his own hands. There was no sunlight either, as if a heavy piece of fabric had blocked it out. Shilian felt around the bottom of the well, feeling up several bricks, and pressed them down in a certain order. With a rumbling noise, a short, small door opened on the side. Shilian dropped down on all fours and slowly crawled through the path opened by the small door. The moment he entered, he could hear another rumbling noise behind, shutting the opening. After half an instant's time, he finally crawled to the end of the tunnel. Shilian stood and straightened his back, snapped his fingers, and held up a small flicker of flames. After that small ball of flames was ignited, as if in response, not far in the distance, another faint light appeared like a pearl, waking up from its deep slumber, blinking open its bright eyes. Soon after, more and more pearls lit up, spreading throughout and illuminating the surroundings that appeared clearer and clearer to be the great hall of an underground palace. Above the great hall, thousands of sparkling stars were embedded. It must be hard to imagine that the imperial mausoleum of the ancient kingdom of Shanle was hidden beneath the scorched earth of Mount Taicang. Those brilliant stars were night pearls and diamonds embedded in the ceiling. The night pearls brightened with light and the diamonds reflected their radiance. When they crossed paths, the result was a dazzling brilliance, like a dream. It was like a minuscule Milky Way hidden below the ground. Each of the night pearls and diamonds were priceless. Every single one was worth an entire lifetime of endless riches. Shelian didn't spare them any looks and walked directly through the great hall, entering the crypt at the very back. In comparison to the great hall, this tomb was exceedingly simple, as the chamber wasn't fully completed. There was no glamorous decor, only 2 coffins. Between the coffins stood a person, dressed in exquisite clothing, a golden mask on its face, and a sword extended, sharp and dazzling, pointed at him. However, this person only maintained that position and didn't make any movement. Shelian approached, minding his own business, without a single care for that person. That was because Shelian knew that behind the golden mask there was no face, and under those exquisite clothes there was no person. The only thing standing was an empty sack held together by bundles of dried hay. For so long, only the set of elegant dress robes and this mask stood by the sides of those 2 solitary coffins in his stead. On top of each coffin was a small golden plate, but the things in those plates were wildly disparate. Fruits of some sort, dried and shriveled to the core, and blackened, rotten, hard blocks of who knows what. After Shelian entered the chamber, he cleaned out those things and threw them out by the corner of the crypt. He felt around his sleeves and folds. Originally, he had a half-eaten bun on him, but that bun was given to Taicang, so now he had nothing. Thus he said, "Father, Mother, I deeply apologize. I've forgotten to bring something for this visit." Naturally, no one answered him. Shelian slowly sat down and leaned against one of the coffins. After zoning out for some time, he finally spoke again. "Mother, I saw Qirong. Qirong didn't die. He turned into a ghost. I really don't know how he lived these past hundreds of years." Shelian shook his head. He killed a lot of people, and now there are people trying to kill him. The heavens probably won't forgive him either. I really don't know what to do with him. He was going to say more when suddenly, from extremely close, came the soft sound of wailing. Shelian froze. His expression changed drastically. He listened closely. It wasn't a hallucination. It really was the sound of crying. The cry was low, soft, and would have easily been missed if he wasn't paying attention. The sound was also high-pitched. If it wasn't a child, then it must be a woman. The cries were nearby, as if they were only separated by a thin wall, the sound clinging close to him. Shelian whipped his head around and at last confirmed that the sound came from the coffin he was leaning against. Amidst his shock, the first words that came blurting out were unconsciously joyous. "Mother, is that you?" However, Shelian snapped out of it immediately, knowing that what he had desperately hoped for would never come true. His mother had passed 800 years ago, relieved of suffering, and she had never devolved to a grudging ghost. The emotion behind those cries was also not of despair, but terror. In that very moment, who in the world would be hiding in his mother's coffin and crying? Shelian couldn't hold back for another second and threw open the cover of the coffin with his left hand, his right hand on Fang Xin, ready to strike. But the moment he saw what was inside, the striking sword stopped in its path. Lying in the coffin, singularly, was the form of a person covered in elegant black attire, its face wrapped with a face cover. The only possible person who it should have been was his mother, but the one lying in the casket was most definitely not her. The form was small and short, its body type completely different, and the most significant thing was, this person was trembling. It was a real, live person. Shirley ripped off the face cover. Sure enough, beneath the fabric was the face of a young child. His heart froze at that very moment. He grabbed the child and lifted him, his voice shocked and panicked. "Where's my mother? What did you do to my mother's body?" Although that elegant black dress didn't look anything out of the ordinary, it was in fact woven by the silk of an extremely rare worm. The silk was a tribute from a small foreign nation, and weaving it to make clothing took intricate craftsmanship. Interwoven with fragrant herbal satchels and sealed into the coffin, the cadaver would remain preserved for thousands of years, allowing the dead to look as if they were still amongst the living. However, at that moment, the one wearing the silk black dress was this child. So where did the body of his mother go? What condition would it be in now? Shirley didn't dare to think deeply about it, and could only demand answers from this unknown child in his hold. "Where's my mother? Who are you? Why are you here? What did you do with my mother's body?" But how could a child, scared to tears, answer any of his questions? He was too scared to even speak. Shirley dragged him out of the coffin and realized suddenly that some ashen white powder had been shaken out of the black dress from the movement. Face white as a sheet, he looked into the coffin and found the bottom of the casket was also covered with a thin layer of powder. The world spun and Shirley felt his heart stop. His grip loosened, letting the child go, and he fell to his knees before the coffin, paralyzed. He didn't dare to touch the powder with his hands, but he couldn't just let it sit and sift either, like incense ashes flying in the wind. Although in denial, he knew deep within what it was. After being forcibly removed from the silk funeral garb, what else could a sealed cadaver of 800 years become? Instantly, Shillian's mind fell into chaos. Unable to think, he held his head with his hands, and there was ringing in his ears. Just then, his back tensed. His instinct sensed danger behind. He whipped his head around, his hand fast like lightning, and grabbed. He grabbed barehandedly the blade of a sword. Someone behind his back had tried to stab him, and this person was that stack of bundled hay. It turns out someone had long since snuck in, dressed themselves in that exquisite attire, put on the mask, and disguised themselves as a lifeless stack of hay, waiting silently for him. A loud clanging sound rang in the air, and Shillian broke the blade into two with his bare hands, his face unchanging, with the blood now pooling in his palms. In a flash, he raised his leg and kicked that person in the abdomen, stomping them firmly onto the ground. With their chest solidly pinned, that person grabbed at his boot and struggled, yet unable to move an inch, as if they were nailed to the ground. Shillian bent down at the waist and slapped away the golden mask with one hand, revealing the face of a young man. Shillian yelled, "Who are you? Grave robber? How did you get in?" The child on the side cried, "Daddy!" This cry finally made Shillian remember. This man and child had looked familiar. Weren't they the pair that he had saved, that Chirong almost cooked and ate back at the Green Ghost's lair? Shillian instantly understood the situation. He swung a punch like thunder at the man's jaw, roaring, "Chirong, get the hell out. I'm going to kill you." That man laughed as he spat blood. "Cousin Crown Prince, what a joyous occasion we meet again, he laughed. Although the face was different, who else could this insane psychotic laughter belong to, if not Qirong? When he became formless, he possessed that young father. No need for further explanation, but after his material body was thrown into that cauldron by Lang Chen Chou and melted, to avoid pursuit, he must have used the chaos of everyone running for their lives to possess the young man, and came to the imperial tomb of Shanle. Otherwise, how could any commoner know of the secret catacomb of Shanle royalty? And how could they have come in such a short space of time? The child he brought along may have been for food, or maybe it was for hiding him in the coffin to divert Shilian's attention so as to ambush him from behind. Qirong held his face, looking wronged by Shilian's punch, and shouted, "Cousin, why are you so mad? It's not like you'd die from a stab wound." He chuckled. Shilian punched him again twice, his eyes red around the rims. "How had my mother always treated you? And yet you treat her like this. How could you? To her body." Qirong humphed. "Auntie is long dead. The person is no more. So what difference do corpses or ashes make? The corpse has only changed form. Isn't it still there? Here you are, tears and snot. Weren't you much tougher when you killed Anle? I can't believe my good old cousin actually has two faces." He then changed face and spat. "How could I treat her like this? You're the one to blame. Don't you even know how to reflect on yourself? This is all your fault. You, god of misfortune, you have the gall to come cry at the imperial tomb of Shanle." Shilin stomped down hard again, and Qirong screamed, spewing blood from his mouth. But he looked even more excited, using both his hands to hold on firmly to the now blood-soaked white boot, while howling, "That's right, that's right. Just like this. This is more like you. Fight, fight, kill, fight ruthlessly, kill cruelly. Don't give me that saintly look, as if you are so burdened with unspeakable sin. Disgusting." The child came crawling over, bawling, "Dad, Dad, are you all right?" He couldn't understand what was happening, only that his father was being trampled. From his point of view, Shilian was like a violent demon, but scared of losing his only father, he wouldn't back down and tried desperately to pull off the boot on his father's chest. That young man wouldn't stop spewing blood, scaring the child half to death, and he used his hands to cover his father's mouth, as if that could stop the bleeding. Seeing this, Shilian slowly calmed down, realizing that the owner of this body was innocent, and eased his foot slightly. He pointed down the tip of Feng Xin, nudging it to Qirong's cheek, and said forebodingly, "Qirong, get the hell out. Get the hell out yourself. Don't believe I won't pull out your spirit with your tongue." Technically, to pull out the tongue of another from the root, one could certainly pull out the attached haunting ghost along with it. Qirong cried derisively, I won't get the hell out. So what are you going to do? Go on, pull. Come. Gonna kill me? I might just die, so don't miss this chance. Otherwise, you won't ever find my ashes in this lifetime." He even stuck out his tongue intentionally, as if he couldn't wait for Shilian to make good on his threat, and used that bloody method to pull his spirit out from this fleshy body. He blew many raspberries. It's not like the person I'm possessing is anyone important, so why don't you? No one would know, no one would care. Your Highness's holy radiance won't be damaged. Look, I crumbled your mother to ashes. Aren't you going to kill me? He laughed again. The child couldn't move Shilian's boot, so he hugged his leg and cried louder. Don't kill my dad. Don't kill my daddy. Shilian's breathing was becoming more labored, his head dizzy, his body shaking, his hands itching to crush Qirong's skull, but he couldn't do it. Qirong spread his hands. Cousin Crown Prince, what a failure, what an absolute failure. Shilian picked him up off the ground, raised his fists, and rained punch after punch on Qirong's face, yelling with each punch, Shut up, shut up, shut up. Yet the more enraged he got, the happier Qirong became. To be able to drag the both of them to the same hell, Qirong was filled with rapture. His eyes shone brightly. See, this is your true face. Cousin Crown Prince, who knows you better than me in this world? You might look like a pathetic, drowned dog that anyone can trample. But I know, you're still proud on the inside. You couldn't stand anyone calling you a failure. You must hate me for calling you a failure. Have I stabbed your heart enough to bleed? Hurry, come. Or are you going to tell me loudly that this body is innocent, so you won't kill me in order to spare him? Come, come, show me what you'll do. With so much provocation blended in that cocky, crazed laughter, Shilian couldn't stand it anymore. He unsheathed Feng Xin. With the flash of a swing, the ominous black blade struck down.